Okay, good morning. We are at the very top of 48a, Memches, the Mishnah at the very top of the page. So we already saw a similar discussion in the Mishnah about decommissioning or canceling the Avodah Zarah status of houses and stones, and now the Mishnah is going to deal with trees. Shalosh Asherah, saying there are three types of Asherah, and Asherah is the name the Torah gives to a particular tree that was worshipped. Ilan shenatod mitchila l'shem avodas kochavim, a tree that was planted for the purpose of avodah zarah, harizu asura. Then you can't use that, can't get any benefit from that whatsoever. Gido pislo l'shem avodas kochavim. But what if you have an existing tree and then you prune it or you trim it, um, and uh, and for the purpose of avodah zarah, v'hachlif, and then it grows. So, like, what the mission is getting at is the tree itself was never worshipped, and now the new growth is what's going to be worshipped. So, no tomasha hechli. So what you can do is you can remove the new growth, and the rest of the tree, the original tree, is permitted in benefit. Um, Now, if clearly the intent here must have been to only worship the new growth of the tree. So, one can imagine that perhaps the Avodah Zarah needs to be designated from inception to be valid for the Avodah Zarah, perhaps. That's the way I could conceive of this. And so therefore the original tree, which had grown of its own and was never worshipped, is not included in the worship. It's only once it's being sanctified, as it were, for Avodah Zarah, the new growth is the only thing that gets worshipped, and that's why the original tree is still okay. Once you cut down um, once you cut down the cut off the new growth. And third, Hami tachta avos kochavim unatala. What if you didn't worship the tree, or the tree itself was not being worshipped? It was just kind of shade or a setting for the idol beneath it. So the tree itself was not worshipped. So you remove the idol, harezim uteres. Then the tree is okay. So Gemara says, Amar Rav Yanai. This applies only where you layer the tree or you graft it onto another tree. Um, so, like the way that you graft trees, or one thing you can do is kind of take a branch and while it's still attached to the tree, connect it to the ground. So that's what we're talking about. In other words, that's a significant change or grafting onto the tree, not just new growth that happens of its own. Um, so it has to be like a significant change. So Gemara says, "Va'anan gido v'pislo." But our Mishnah says if you prune it or you trim it, which is a minor change. So that seems to be that seems to contradict Rav Yanai, who says it has to be a major change. Elakimar de Rav Yanai linyan bitulimar. What Rav Yanai is talking about is talking about removing the Avodah Zarah status. The afagav to hivrich v'hirkiv b'gufo shlion, even if you did this major change, kinatal masha hechlif shapridali. Even so, even though it was a major change to the tree, but if you can reverse it, if you can remove the new stuff, the new growth, then the original tree is still permissible. Shopper it's okay. I might have thought maybe you're thinking you would have thought that the major change makes this into like a new tree. It's a shinoi, right? It changes the tree from the old tree into the new tree, and now maybe the whole tree is forbidden. So Rav says, no, you can still back out of it. Felisa Kula, maybe the whole thing should be Elser Kamashmal. Rav Yanai says, no, you can still back out of it. Amar Shmuel, Hamishach Ilan, you bow down to a tree, Tosefte Asura. Then anything that grows after that worship is prohibited, for you can't benefit from it. Masir Balazar, Gido Pisal Avodas Kochavim, no the Hechlif, no Tomasha Hechlif. So our mission says that The original tree seems fine if you just remove the new stuff that grew, then you're okay. So how can Shmuel say that the um, one second. No. So how can our Mishnah says it's only if you do something, if you to the tree a minor change, you do pruning or trimming, that's when the additional growth is forbidden. But logido pislo, but if you did not do that, then then wouldn't we imply that the new growth is not forbidden? So where it says Amar Lach Shmuel Hamane, where Shmuel would say to you, um, um, so in other words, Shmuel is saying that if you worship the tree, that if the tree is an object of Avodah Zarah, then anything new that grows there is becomes forbidden. And our Mishnah seemed to say that's only if you did some change to it first. So Shmuel says Hamani Rabbanan. No, this is only according to the Rabbanan, the rabbis. Shmuel Yomer Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Yehuda. But Shmuel is addressing a different opinion, that of Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Yehuda. Diamar Ilan Shenatol B'Sof Avodah Aser. He says if a tree that you first plant, it's like first planted as a regular tree, and then you decide to worship it. That tree is forbidden. So that is what Shmuel is talking about here, according to that view. Masku Ravashi, so Ravashi says, "Mimai Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Yehuda Rabbanan B'Tosefes Plige." Wait a minute. You think you're saying that the argument between Rabbi Yossi and the rabbis is talking only about the additional growth of the tree, the part that grew after the Avodah Zarah took place. Still, Tosefes l'divrei kol aser. No, maybe that's not it. Maybe everybody agrees that the additional growth is forbidden. Uvi kara plige. We're talking about the original tree, right? Maybe they're arguing about whether the whole tree becomes forbidden because you worship the new parts. Rabbi Yossi says that the original tree is forbidden now. As it's written, they're Asherah, they're trees of worship. You have to burn. So meaning you burn the whole tree. Rabbanan Savar, Ikar Ilan Shari, and the rabbis say no, the original tree that was there before it was worshipped is okay, but Dichsiv Asherem Tigadeun. It also says about these trees that you should cut them off, right? So cutting it off means cut off the part that was worshipped. Ezu Ilan Shagidua Asur Vikar Shari. What kind of tree are we talking about that only the new growth is forbidden and the original tree is fine? Must be a tree that was not planted for the purpose of idol worship. It was planted as a regular tree, and somebody comes along and starts worshiping the it. So only the new growth is forbidden. And maybe you'll say, no, we don't want to characterize
What are they
the.
worshiping part of it then? I mean, if there's a tree there,
Yeah, it seems like
once the tree is there and people stop in the street and stop to worship it, do they know that they're worshiping this branch or that branch? They're worshiping the whole tree.
well, okay. So first of all, if it's public property, that the rules don't apply. So we're talking
Okay, but
about.
whatever it is, I mean, so
Okay, so yeah, so it sounds like the nature that like they're taking the position, and this is weird. I agree with you. It is a little weird that the nature of this service is like, okay, now I'm designating this tree for Avodah Zarah, but I can only worship the parts that grow after I start worshiping it. It sounds a little weird, right? But that seems to be the approach. Um,
but aren't we talking about somebody else may come to worship it? So,
No, no,
every,
we're talking about somebody has a tree in their backyard, and this is what they do. The question is, can you buy that wood and use it for firewood? Like once it's if it's cut off or whatever, can you get any benefit from the tree? Can you have a an apple from that tree?
yeah,
Okay, but yeah,
so
I
if it
agree with you. It's strange.
grows
Like you would
beyond a
think.
certain point, then
Mhm.
he says, well, now I'm going to decide to worship it. But what's he worshiping? Only the apple? Only the branch, the third branch from the left? I mean, once he starts worshiping, he
I
worships
know,
the whole
right?
tree.
Yeah, you would think, right? That's what makes sense to me. But apparently there's something else going on here, that there's some understanding of the details of how this worship designation works is like only from now forward.
And I can
that,
understand from now forward, but it seems we're
but it should
saying
be the
that
whole
only
tree,
this
right?
part of the
Yeah,
tree.
you would think the whole tree. So I don't know. I don't understand the theology of it either. Yeah, you're right. It's a very good question, but there's some kind of idol worship theology here that one. Now look, I would say that if the person who the idol worshiper indeed worships the whole tree, then none of this would apply. It would seem right. Then it would seem, yeah, this is an object that was worshipped, and it is forbidden. It seems like this whole discussion is predicated on a type of idol worship where you only designate from here forward, whatever the future development of the tree. It's a little weird. I agree.
So he puts a sign on it so that the Jew who comes by knows that he worshiped the second branch on the
Oh,
left
so
side.
how do you know? Okay, that's a good question too. How do you know? Well, this is a theoret as are many discussions in the Gemara. This is a theoretical discussion. So how you would verify that? It's a good question. Also, I don't know. I have no idea. And like, how could you even observe it? Like, can you? I mean, we have bamboo growing behind our house. Okay, so bamboo grows amazingly fast. Like in a week, it can shoot up 2 feet. um, you can almost see it growing. Okay, but that's not typically the case with trees, right? If from one year
Years,
to the next, I couldn't
years,
tell you if this branch grew, and maybe it grew
years.
an inch, right?
It takes years for the tree to grow.
Exactly, yeah. So it seems to be like a theoretical construct that we're dealing with here. These are all excellent questions, and the only thing I can tell you is that it's rather theoretical and also kind of an odd theology of Avodah Zarah. Um, okay, so v'chitema hadol and tartzinan hachi. Now, maybe you'll say no. Don't explain the argument between Rabbi Yossi and the rabbis uh, about the um, about the original tree. Uh, Epuch Rabbanon Rabbi Yossi Bar Yehuda. Um, that wouldn't be a good argument because you could just turn around the opinions. We could say, that we mixed up the rabbis and Rabbi Yossi. Rabbi Yossi Bar Yehuda Rabbanon. So, like, just switch the. You could say just switch the views as we sometimes do. So Gemara says, "In Cain, Guido Pislo Man Katane Law." So in that case, who would be the author of our Mishnah, which says that if you do this minor change, pruning or trimming the tree, and then only the future growth is forbidden, Larabanan, then it wouldn't be neither one of them would accord with this. Irabanan, if it was the rabbis below Guido Pisulo, Nami Tosefas Asura, according to the rabbis, it's the future growth is always forbidden, right? It doesn't even require any minor change. You Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Huda, or if you'll take the opinion of Rabbi Yossi, Ikar Ilan Nami Yasser, then the whole tree is forbidden, as makes more sense to us. The Gemara says, "Yibai same Rabba, non Yibai same Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Huda." No, you could explain it that Ravashi could be applied to either one. Yibai same Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Huda. Um, Now, Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Huda, who says that even the original tree is forbidden. So Ravashi could be saying, "Kikam Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Huda below Gido Pisla, Ikar Ilan Aser." No, that opinion is only if there was no action taken on the tree. Then we would say that um, the original tree is forbidden. Okay, so this kind of gets into what you were asking about, Ken. Um, if there's no intention expressed here, and the tree is worshipped, then we assume Rabbi Yossi would assume that the whole tree is forbidden, right? But if you did if the idol worshiper did some action, pruned the tree, and then that indicates that he only wants to worship the future growth of the tree. Um, so. So when did Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Yehuda say that the original tree is still forbidden bistama? That's if you didn't take any action. Avogido pislo gal yadate d'utos nichalei. But if you took some action to change the tree, then you are revealing that your intent as an idol worshiper is to only worship the future parts of the tree that grow. Okay, so or you could say by saying Rabbanan, or you could say the Mishnah follows the rabbis. Gido pislo itzrichalei. The Mishnah had to tell you that even when you pruned the tree, you did that minor change, it's still only the future is forbidden. Since you did something to the tree, like you were saying, Ken, like since you would think that okay, you trimmed the tree, like you're in maybe the intention, maybe we should assume the intention is you're straightening up the tree, so it makes a good object of worship. So that was Kamash Malon. It tells us no. The Mishnah says that no, that's not the case. That when you trim the tree in order to make it to designate it for Avodah Zarah, you are specifically designating only the future growth. So this is the Gemara's view of how Asherah worship goes, for what that's worth. Okay. Okay.
A little,
Ezo
little bit,
Asherah.
little
Yeah.
bit convoluted.
Yes, I would say so. Okay. Um, Ezo Asherah. I mean, look, for us to understand the idolatry in the first case is, it seems very far-fetched for us, right? Like, first of all, it's drummed into us by our own theology, but also in general, like as people living post-enlightenment, the idea that a tree has divine powers or is an object of worship seems a little, is a little hard for us to get into in the first place. Ezu Asherah. What is an Asherah tree? Kol sheish tachtea avodos kochavim, a tree under which, so it's not my understanding of the Mishnah is it's not species of tree necessarily. It's any tree under which there is an idol. Rabbi Shimon Omer Kol Shel Ovdim Osa. No, Rabbi Shimon says no. It's the tree itself that gets worshipped. So this is a fundamental argument here about the Avodah Zarah, right? Is the tree itself the object of worship, or is the tree the type of tree under which you're supposed to put your Avodah Zarah, your idol? Master Sidon happened once in Sidon, but Elon Sheyovno. So there was a tree that was worshipped. Umatzu Tachtav Gal, and they found a hill underneath it, beneath the branches. Arlen Rabbi Shimon Bidku Sagalazeh. Go see what's buried there. Ubadku. They dug it up. Umatzu Lotzura. They found a statue there. Amalahan Hoel Lotzura Heinovdin. Since they're worshiping the image, the statue itself, and not the tree itself, not your lahan esailan. The tree is not a problem. The tree itself is not a problem. Okay, so Gemara wants to know Ezu Asherah. What kind of question is that? V'anantan shlosh asherastan. V'anan shlosh asherastan. We already had the Mishnah before that discussed the three types of Asherah. So not three types of Asherah, but like how something becomes validated for worship. So like now you're asking what's an Asherah. It seems like you knew already. So Achikama is what the Mishnah means. Shtayim l'divrei hakol. There's two types of Asherah that everyone thinks is forbidden. V'achas machlokas Rabbi Shimon v'Rabbanan, and one that is subject to this machlokas of what is. So everybody agrees about the details of, how you treat, how you understand how the prohibition applies to the tree. But there is a third point on which Rabbi Shimon and the rabbis disagree, which is it the tree itself being worshipped, or is the tree the setting for the worship? What is the Asherah about which they argue? The rabbis say any tree that has that shelters an idol. And Rabbi Shimon so no, the tree itself is being worshipped. Okay, what kind of tree is assumed to? So now we're getting into the species thing. So it seems like there was a particular species that was particularly suited to be worshipped. Amarav kol shekomen yoshvin tachtea, any tree under which your priests, your avodah zarah priests are sitting, vein tomin me perosa, and they don't eat the fruit. Okay, so that's an indication that any kind of tree that they'll sit underneath it and not eat the fruit. Why aren't they eating the fruit? Because it's so to speak hektish to the avodah zarah. Shmuel Amar, Afilu Amre Hani Tamre Leve Natsrefe Aser. Um, even if they're saying these particular dates are dedicated to Nasrafeh, some kind of avodah zarah, then Aser, it's still then the tree is prohibited. To Rame Be Shikra, because they could make beer out of the dates, V'shasi Lebi Yomeinu, and use that to drink on the holidays. So um, in other words, even though it seems like they're going to consume the dates, so we said before that it's if they're not going to consume the fruit, then that's an avodah zarah tree. But here we're saying that, yeah, if they say they're gonna consume the fruit as part of the idolatry festival, then that's still an asherah. Amra Meimar, that makes sense. Amrle Save de Fumpadisa, the sages of Pumbedisa told me, Hilchos like a Shmuel. The halacha is like Shmuel, who says that if they say they're going to consume the fruit um, for an idolatry festival, then it's an idolatrous tree.
So
Next
according to
Mishnah.
Shmuel, then he would hold that if they didn't eat the fruits or didn't mix it and make a drink out of it, the tree would not be an Asherah?
No, he's saying I think he's agreeing with Rav that if they're not eating it, that means because it's sanctified fruit. But even if they say we will eat the fruit on the idolatrous holiday, then it's still an idolatrous tree.
So what's the Havamina that if they would, who would have the Havamina different from that? If they, you would think if they eat it, then it's almost pshita obvious that it would be considered a vehicle of avodah zarah, right?
Yeah, well, let's make a parallel to Jewish worship would be Kodesh Kodashim, right? If something's Kodesh Kodashim, you can't eat it at all, right? It's all burned on the Mizbeach. You can't say, I'm going to take this Kodesh Kodashim and eat it on Pesach, right? You can't do that. It's Kodesh Kodashim.
Right.
Um, so okay, next Mishnah.
So you want to
Lo,
say even if they would to eat it, like Kodesh Kodashim, that would be like avodah zarah. That's what Shmuel would be saying.
yeah, if they specifically eating it as part of the festival.
In
But
contrast.
everybody agrees that if they say we're gonna eat the dates from this tree, then it must be a non-idolatrous tree.
Oh, so if everyone were to eat it and
Yeah,
it wasn't designated for their festival, then it would
yeah.
not be.
Then you know it's not a avodah zarah.
I see. Okay.
Okay. Okay, next Mishnah, lo yeshiv b'tzila. So if you have an Asherah tree, you shouldn't sit in its shade because you're benefiting from it. V'im yeshiv tahar, but it doesn't make you tame. So we saw a reference already before that avodah zarah makes you tame with contact. So sitting under the tree, you're not allowed to do it, but that's not the kind of contact that makes you tame. Lo yara tachta, you can't even like walk underneath it. V'im avar tame, but if you did. Like directly under the branches, then you are Tomei. Haisa Gozalos Sarabim. If it is intruding on the public space, v'yara tachta, and you're walking on the road and you're underneath this Asherah tree, um, but you're in the public domain, tahor, then that can't make you Tomei. Um, okay.
Wait, if you walk under it, isn't that in the shade of the tree? If he sits under it, he's
Oh, not necessarily, right? Late in the day or early in the day, the shadow is cast beyond the canopy of the tree, right? You can be in the shade of the tree and not be directly underneath it.
you could be, but also on the other hand, if you sit under the tree in the shade, I'm just thinking if one is under the tree, sitting at it, he's tower, but now he walks under it, he becomes Tame. How can that be?
No,
He's
no,
still
okay.
under the
No, it's like this. It's like if that distinction is between Rishus Harabim and Rishus Yachid. So the tree doesn't have the power to make you tamei in Rishus Harabim because everybody has the right to walk in Rishus Harabim, right? And no one can designate idolatry in Rishus Harabim. Similarly, we were saying the transmission of Tuma doesn't take place in Rishus Harabim. So walking under the tree in private property makes you tame. But if the tree extends, the canopy of the tree extends over the public path, and you're walking on the public path, you're in the clear. The
Oh,
tree
okay.
doesn't have the power to make you tame.
Mhm. Right.
Okay, so the Gemara says lo yeshiv b'tzila. You can't sit in the shadow. Pshita, obviously, like by saying under the rule that you can't have hana from the tree, obviously you can't benefit from its shade. So what's the Mishnah telling us? Amar Rabbi Baruch Hanan Rabbi Yochanan nisrucha el l'tzeil tzila. We're talking about the kind of the shadow of the shadow. So it's like um, it seems to mean if the shadow is so long that it exceeds the size of the original object, right? So the tree, if the tree shadow extends only, as far as the size of the tree beyond itself, then that's the shadow. But very early or late in the day, when the sun is at a low angle and the shadow is cast so long, the Gemara the Gemara is calling that the shadow of the shadow, or like the really extended shadow. Then even that is forbidden. That's what the Mishnah is telling us. Which it's like it's so extreme that even when the shadow extends twice as long as the height of the tree because of the angle of the sun, still that's considered the shadow of the tree, and you can't benefit from it. Um,
So that
Michlal,
applies to the time of the day then.
yes,
So
right,
so later in the day or whatever,
yeah,
when the shadow is not that extensive, it would be okay to sit there then.
yeah. Um, okay, so the Gemara says, all right, well, if that's the case, Michlal would sell kamasa, the regular length of the shadow, like the shadow up till the extent of the I don't know how to call this exactly, but let's say the height of the tree is is h, and so the kind of original shadow is anything that extends h feet outside of or from the tree. Um, so Michlal de B'tzel Masa, and so in that area, Imi Yashav Tamei, because the Mishnah, if you're saying the Mishnah is talking about Seil Tzila, like the extended shadow, and that's when you're not Tamei. So does that mean that in the regular shadow you are Tamei? The Gemara says, no, that's not what it means. Tafilu Tzel Kamasa Name Im Yashav Tahar. No, it's saying that um, you're tahor in either case, but even in the regular shadow and the extended shadow. Wakamashmalon. So what's it telling us? Tafilu tzel silo lo yeshev. It's not telling us details about differences between the tuma caused or not caused by the shadow or the extended shadow. What it's telling you is that even in the extended shadow, you're not supposed to sit there. Okay. Ikon
But the
Seifa.
Mishnah uses the words tahor and vatame.
Right.
So how do we say now it's not talking about Inyan Tuma?
No, because it's talking about two things. Because the Mishnah made two statements, right? Don't sit there. Don't sit under the shade. And when does it make you tame? Right? So the Gemara says, since if you're, and then the Gemara says, well, the Mishnah is talking about the extended shadow, but about what is it talking about the extended shadow, right? It's telling you that in both the regular and extended shadow, you can't sit there. It's not telling you that you become you're not tame under the extended shadow. It's not telling you to imply that you are tame under the regular shadow. That's not the case. What it's telling you is that both the extended shadow and the regular shadow you should not use. But it's not the implication that you're drawing is not to be drawn about the tuma aspect.
If I read this Mishnah again, lo yeshev tzila, period. That you shouldn't sit there. But if you did, bidi evid im yashav tahor, it's still tahor. I mean, that's
Right.
why I'm looking at it differently now. They're not and not even talking. Just say you shouldn't sit there. But if you did, it's okay. It's not a big deal. You're not bidi.
Yeah.
You're not tamei. So it's sort of a separate point. You might think you might be top, but no, you're not. It doesn't matter what
Yeah,
you said.
yeah. I honestly I like your reading better. Um, it seems it's a little the argument here is a little uh obtuse, perhaps, to me and sounds like to you. In other words, good question. I actually agree with you, but that's not how the Gemara reads it. Seifa. Some read this about the end of the Mishnah. V'im yashav tahar. If you did sit there, you're tahar. Pshita, that's obvious. Like since you're not under the tree, why would you be tameh? It's only telling you this to distinguish between, to not distinguish between the regular shadow and the extended shadow. Does that imply that you can sit in the extended shadow? Well, no, says Gemara, Hakamashma, it's telling you that fuel itself Kamasim Yashav Tar. Even in the original shadow, in the regular shadow, it's telling you that there even there you're still Tahar. Okay, same idea, just approached from a different perspective. Now, the next thing in the Mishnah is V'lo yaver tachtea. Don't walk under it. V'im tame. And if you did walk under it, then you're tame. My tame. Why are you tame? Yefsher deleka tikroves avodas kochavim. Because there must be some. If you're walking under an ashera tree, there must be buried there some. Some korban, some idolatrous offering under the tree, and anything itself that is itself idolatrous makes you tamei midrabanan. And since you're under the canopy of the tree, it's like being in the same room as the thing that makes you tamei. That's why you become tamei. Money. Who's this mission according to? Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira. We're going to say it's Rabbi Yehuda. To Tanya, we have a brayso. Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira Omer. Minayin l'tikrovas kochavim shemetama ba'oel. How do you know that an offering to an avodah zarah makes you tame if you're in the same room? Tumas ohel. Shanamar vayisamed leval pa'or vayachu zivchei mesim. Pasuk says in Tehillim, describing the experience of the 40 years in the desert. Um, they attached themselves to Baal Peor, the Avodah Zarah, and they ate the sacrifices of the dead. So it's specifically using the term zivchei mesim, something about death, and attaching it to avodah zarah. Ma meis matam b'oel, aftikros avodas kochavim matam b'oel. So what makes you? How do you become tani? In the same way they become tani to a dead person, i.e., being in the same room or under the tree canopy. Okay.
So is this Ifilo Ba'onis? Shogeg or Ifilo Ba'onis? He's walking on the street. He
Yeah.
doesn't.
Yeah, if you go into a room where there's a dead body and you weren't aware, you still become tame, right?
Yeah, and I was just thinking about a Beit Paras where a Cohen walks through the cemetery, right?
Okay, yeah. So there it's unclear if he came into contact with a dead body. But here I guess it's kind of like a chazaka, right? And the Asherah is going to have somewhere beneath it, offerings. And so if you're under the canopy, then you're in the same room as what we assume to be that there are offerings here.
But how does he know it's an Asherah tree? I mean, you assume every tree on the road is an Asherah?
No, no. There's particular. So the Mishnah kind of alluded to that. I mean, my understanding is that an Asherah is a species of tree, but that doesn't seem to be quite right. There has to be some kind of evidence that it was worshipped, I guess. And that's the Mishnah alluded to that by saying, like, how do you know if it was worshipped? If you see the priest sitting there and not eating the fruit, or saying they won't eat the fruit, then that's an indication. So there's got to be some indication that this particular tree is an object of worship. But once that is the case, if you walk under it, then you're assumed to be tummy.
In Achinami, but walking on the street, how does the priest worshipped it today, and you walk there tomorrow. I
Okay,
mean,
so remember that walking on the street is not on the public street. It
okay,
doesn't
but
have
I
the
mean,
power.
but private.
If you
Okay,
go
but
into their backyard, yeah. So I guess it's like be careful if you go to your idol worshiping friend's backyard. Don't, you know, maybe. But even so, like I think there has to be some indication that this tree was worshipped, right? You can't just assume that. We're not going to assume that every tree in an idol worshiper's backyard is an object of worship. No, there has to be some indication. That's why the Mishnah mentioned if the priests come over, for a barbecue and they're sitting under the tree and saying, we're not going to eat the fruit of this tree, that's an indication. There are probably other indications, like, like this way to the temple, to the Asherah tree. Um, there has to be some kind of indication in order to make it qualify.
right.
Ibailu, they asked, Avar, o over. Um,
I think you're on Ayatag Gozela de Rabim, right?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I missed the line. Haisa also Rabbi Vera Tachtei Atar. Mishnah said if it's in the public, if it intrudes into the public space, and you walked underneath it, then you're not tummy, right? Ibailu. So they ask avar or over. We're talking past tense or present tense. If you're saying past tense, um, it means like that's b'di'evet. Like you shouldn't, try not to walk under the trees even in the public domain. But if you did, we're not going to make you tummy. If we use the present tense, then like over, if you're passing through, then the mission doesn't. It's not making a judgment over whether you should or shouldn't have done it. So the question is not do you become tame? That clearly the Mishnah states clearly you're not tame. But the question is should you avoid it anyway? Rabbi Yitzchak when the Lazar Mishmei de Chizki Amar over. Rabbi Yitzchak says you don't need to avoid it. And the Mishnah is like it's fine to walk under the street. Rabbi Yochanan Amar im avar. Rabbi Yochanan says no. Like if you happen to pass, if you mistakenly pass underneath, implying that you shouldn't do it in the first place. V'lo pligi, but they're not really arguing. Hadik or dirka achrina. Like a dirka achrina. If there's no other way to get from A to B, then nobody's going to tell you you can't go on this road, right? But if there's another way and you could have gone on the other way, which is not under the tree, it's better if you do that. Okay. Rav Shesha said to his shamas, Kimatis lahasam arhitni. When we get there, like when we get to that place where we're under the Asherah in the public domain, arhitni, like make sure let's go quickly. Hey, Chidami. Okay, so Gemara says, well, what's he talking about here? Either like a dirkachmina, if there's no other way, lamali arhitni. Like, why do you need to rush? Why do you have to pass through so quickly? It's you're mishrashari, you're permitted. Either ika dirkachmina, and if there was another way, kiamar arhitni mishari, then he should have gone the other way. What is this? Let's rush. Gemara says, liolam de like a dirkachmina. There was no other way. There's only one road. Adam chashuv shani, somebody who is an Adam Chashuv, a distinguished person, has maybe a different standard. He should have a more visceral rejection of the idea of Avodah Zarah.
So what's the
Next
point
mission.
there? I
Hmm.
mean, uh, so what is it he's saying there? What's the point there? Adam
So the
Chashav.
point is, for you and me, it's like, don't worry about it. For the rabbi, he should like express a greater sensitivity to avoiding even this kind of even a permissible aspect of avodah zarah.
So I mean, so
So
what's the question? If there was another way, he goes the other way. If there's no other
yeah,
way, then he goes
right.
the way.
So
So what is it even the question?
the
Well,
question is, if there was no
question.
other way, then why did he feel he had to hurry through that part of the path, right? Like why this visceral need to get away from this tree? And the Gemara answer is because he's the rabbi,
Oh,
right?
so there was no other way. So he
No
runs.
other way, and he has to go that way. And it's even permissible to go that way, but he has this extra
Oh, so
sensitivity that he just doesn't like being under the tree,
he
even though
runs
it's
fast.
permissible.
So then he runs it. Okay,
Yeah.
runs.
What now? Continuing about the details of the tree, you can plant vegetables under the tree in the winter of a low bimosachama, but not in the summer. Okay, because in the summer, there I guess the vegetables are benefiting from the shade, right? So it won't be too hot. In the winter, when it's not so hot, there's no difference if it's if you're under the tree or not under the tree. So in the winter, there's no issue with the vegetables being under the tree. V'hachziron v'hachazarin lo b'mos hachama v'lo b'mos hakshamim. But lettuce you can't plant in the winter or the summer. What is it about lettuce? Because the shade is good for it all year long. Rabbi Yossi Omer, Af lo yirakos b'mos hakshamim. Rabbi Yossi says, never mind, you can't plant vegetables even in the winter. Mipnei she'hanevoya no sheras alein, because the leaves fall on them. V'ahovel lahen lezevel. There's mulch, right? And leaves fall off the tree and they become mulch for the vegetables. So your vegetables have benefited, their growth has benefited from the leaves of the tree of Avodah Zarah. So nothing to do with sun or shade. Being under the tree gives you benefits from the tree.
How do you say about the lettuce? We say it doesn't matter, right? Whether summer or winter, but there's no shade in the winter. So what's the benefit?
What do you mean? What do you mean? There's sunny
And,
days in the winter,
right, but there
but
but
the
we're
sun isn't
assuming
so
there are no
strong.
leaves. No
Like if it
leaves.
were in the sun in the winter, the sun isn't so strong that it would damage the lettuce. So it doesn't matter if it's under the tree or not under the tree, the lettuce would be just fine. In the summer, the lettuce would dry out if it were in the sun. So the tree is giving it benefit, giving it some shade, and that enables it to grow.
Oh, so you're focusing on the sun rather than the shade.
Yeah, yeah, right.
Okay, if there's shade, I'm saying there's no this in the winter, there are no leaves, so there's no shade. So
Yeah,
it's
I'm not sure what kind of crop we're talking about here, but I guess there are things like root vegetables grow in the winter, don't they?
they
I think
do.
so. Yeah. Okay. So Gemara says Lameimra Rabbi Yossi Savar Zev Zegorim Aser. So Rabbi Yossi um, who says that you can't plant your vegetables under the tree because it's deriving some benefit from the tree. So we're going to look at this from the perspective of it's not deriving all of its benefits from the tree, right? It's getting nourishment from the ground and it's getting some nourishment, as it were, from the leaves of the tree. Okay, so it's mixed, right? So does this mean that Rabbi Yossi says that even when the benefit is mixed, like there's forbidden benefit and permitted benefit, does that still become usher? For Rabbanan Amri Zev Zegorim Mutar, and the rabbis would say no. It's if it's partly part of the nourishment is forbidden and part is permitted, then it's still okay. But we saw the opposite. Litznan. Here's another Mishnah. Rabbi Yossi Omer Shachek V'Zohar L'Ruach Omatu Layam. What do you do with Avodah Zarah? You grind it up into dust and you scatter it in the wind or in the sea. Amrlo, they said to him, Afhi Zevel. Well, if you're scattering it, then it becomes compost. V'nemar lo yidbak b'yelchem u'min cherem. And so, how are you allowing Avodah Zarah compost to be mixed in with regular compost? So it seems like the rabbis would say that mixed is bad. It's still bad. And Rabbi Yossi is saying mixed is okay. So that's the opposite from what we're seeing in our Mishnah. Akasha Rav and Kasha Rabbi Yossi. It's the opposite opinions. So Gemara says, "Bishlam at Rabbi Yossi at Rabbi Yossi Kasha." No, I can explain Rabbi Yossi, right? Hasam deka'azil ibud matir. Since in the case of disposing of the dust of the idol, it's like, okay, once it's been ground up, it's no longer doesn't have the avodah zarah power anymore, right? It's fine. But hachadol would be here where the tree is still standing, right? We're talking about leaves falling from the tree and turning into mulch. The tree is still standing. The avodah zarah hasn't been eradicated, so then it's a problem. El drabanan kasha. But how would you explain the rabbis? Like in the case of the tree, they say it's fine to use for the leaves to contribute to the growth of the vegetable. And the case of disposing of the avodah zarah, they say it's not fine. All right, how do you explain that? So we'll explain it by reversing the opinions, right? So they'll align with each other. Levi saying, or you could answer lo tepu. No, you don't have to do that. Rabbi Yossi kedushanin. We already answered Rabbi Yossi. For the Rabbanon, and how do you explain the apparent contradiction in the rabbis' views? Kida Amar Rav Mari Bereder Rav Kana, as Rav Mari said, Ma shemashbiach babasar, or pogem babasar. What improves the skin spoils the meat. Um, so, in other words, something can look healthy from the outside, but be rotten in the inside. So, hachanami here too. Masha mashbiach ba nivaya pogem batzel. When what the tree improves with its leaves, it spoils with its shade. Okay, it blocks the sun. Um, so why do the rabbis, discount the benefit that you get from the leaves? Because the same tree that's giving you the leaves, which are to your benefit, is also harming the vegetables with its shade. So um, the net from the tree is it balances out, and there is no net benefit from the tree.
Earlier, we did mention that in some cases the shade helps the tree. There's not too much sun, right? Or no?
Yeah,
Or we were,
yeah. So
you
right. I
want to
mean,
focus on.
you could imagine a situation where either is true, right? Where you can imagine a situation where the sun is beneficial or where the shade is beneficial, whatever you want to argue in that particular case.
All right.
Okay, let's pause here for today and pick it up here tomorrow. Have a good day, everybody.